Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Melissa Murphy Pavone, and she is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
So, that what you do is a big mouthful there. So, kind of tell us, give us your background.
Sure.
Where did you get started, and what made you decide to really concentrate in on the divorce side of things?
Absolutely. I am a certified financial planner, CFP for short. I know all of the finance world, we always have acronyms and it's very intimidating, but I'll break it down so it's nice and easy. So holistic financial planner by trade, love looking at the whole person, not just the balance sheet, really digging deep into kind of the layers of where you are and where you want to go. Part of that really is unpacking the past money mindset baggage that we all carry with us, whether it's, how we grew up with our parents. Did we get an allowance? Did we talk about money? Do we know how much our parents made? All of that comes with us into our new relationships and our new kind of money mindset as adults. And we're always looking to invest in the future. However, I think it's really important to be present today. And that's where kind of the mindfulness comes in. And sometimes we go through expensive seasons in our lives, and that's okay. So it's a balancing act from learning from our past, investing in our future, but being present and mindful of today. The Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, CDFA for short, is my real why is my mom. I was a child of divorce. And so she made decisions with her heart and not her head. And I wish back then I knew what I know now, because her financial future would look very differently. And so my mantra is really just to level the playing field for the non-CFO spouse and to really educate people. When you're going through a divorce, it's super traumatic. They're just trying to get through the day, and they're not really thinking 10 years in advance. So as a CDFA, I can work in many different capacities, but I'm a financial ally to help look for the future when you can't see past the end of the day.
Right. I think a lot of people, if they haven't been through a divorce or don't have someone like you to help counsel them through, there are many mistakes that they can make in doing this. Can you tell us some of those common mistakes that you have seen people make?
Yeah, unfortunately, when you're looking at kind of like the settlement of, we're trading off assets, people often can look at the balance sheet and say, hey, we have a $100,000 money market account. We have a $100,000 401k. We have a $100,000 Roth IRA. And although all of those things have a $100,000 balance as of today, they're not created equal. And so if we just split them down the middle, that's not always great either. But if we say, okay, you take the tradition or the 401k and I'm going to keep the Roth, or I'm going to keep the money market fund, there's different tax consequences for them. And that's not always explained. And people are just kind of looking at the balance sheet. So I've been in situations where I've been brought in after the divorce, after the documents were signed, as part of post-divorce financial planning. And I'm looking over the settlement and looking at, what was given to my client, and it was like, okay, this is a traditional, this is a 401k. You can't touch this until you're 59 and a half. And when you do, we're going to have to pay tax on it. And they were flabbergasted because that was never explained to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of saying, okay, I'll take the money market because that's liquid now, right? And so we could have used that as part of, okay, we can have a down payment on a house, or, oh, we can start a business or go back to school. Now we have this asset that she can't touch without penalty. And when she does touch it, she's going to have to pay tax on it. So those are the things I hate to see, and it happens more often than we think. So I love coming in and really just educating and empowering people to know what they own and why they own it. I'm not pro-divorce, but if you're going through this traumatic experience, I highly suggest someone hiring a CDFA to help walk along the path with them.
Now, if someone has a business, how does that throw a new wrinkle into all of this?
Oh, small business is always is always a wrinkle in it, right? And so some people come to me and they're like, "Hey, we have a family held, tightly knit business that we run our whole lives through. And so the value of it for tax purposes, right? And like on the books is a little different than real life
Mhm.
cash flow. So that's like another layer of like, we need to dig deeper. And I'm not the IRS by any stretch of the imagination, but we have to make a fair settlement and project things fairly moving forward. So there's definitely an element there. Also, when it comes to business partnerships, if there's a partnership and one partner is getting divorced in that, I always make sure that there's like key cross-sold life insurance policies on the partner to make sure that you don't end up being in business with your partner's either ex-wife
Right.
or widow or whatever it is. So there's a lot of layers to the business aspect of it, especially cash flow wise, that requires a little bit more hand holding. And I think a lot of times people are intimidated because they're like, we don't want, what the value of the business is versus what we say the value of the business is. That gets a little tricky. And we're not worried about that. We just want to make sure that it's a fair settlement moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that also you have someone involved that knows how to value a business. I've seen many
Yeah.
times somebody comes in and they value the business and it's not even close. And I've seen this many times through divorce cases, and it's always the business owner's always like, "Hey, write me a check for that today. I'm out."
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's, so kind of a double-edged sword there in that it's, could be valued too high or it could be valued too low depending on, what's happening. So it's important to make sure that you have that person that can help value that business properly for sure.
Yeah, we will always bring in a forensic accountant on that side or a business valuation specialist for when it comes to small businesses. But it also, we take an extra session during those tightly held businesses to go over the cash flow and the expenses because there's a lot of overlap sometimes where personal expenses get run through the business. And so that's important projecting lifestyle analysis moving forward. If now I do no longer have a portion of the cash flow coming in through the business, what about my car insurance? What about my cell phone? Like
Right.
all of those things that often can be categorized as business expensive. If I'm no longer part of that business or have any ties to it, what does that look like for me? And then also for the business owner, their cash flow is going to change as well on their expenses. So they need to be, cognizant of that as well.
Yeah, that happens many times when someone has, their spouse on payroll. And then,
Mhm.
because that also was funding for insurance and like you said, car expense and so forth. But then also the kids on payroll. That's another thing
Yeah.
that makes a difference with all of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And then as far as like that, like what you said about being on payroll, that affects Social Security, right? That affects your income. That affects, you might have a retirement account tied to that, even if it's kind of a no-show job, if you will, so there's a lot of things that we have to keep in, mind when we're projecting forward for business owners that are going through a divorce.
yeah. What about life insurance? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. As far as yeah, this is like one of the big mistakes I see
Yeah,
actually with divorcees. So oftentimes it'll be written depending upon what state you're in, but the legalese of it is if there is going to be paid either child support or maintenance, that there needs to be a life insurance policy to kind of cover those cash flows moving forward in the event of an, unexpected death. Very oftentimes it's in there, but it's never followed through on.
right.
And even more times when we try to follow through on when I come in and kind of the post-divorce financial planning aspect of it, the lawyers will kind of just say, hey, they have group term insurance through their job. We're not getting another policy, that either seems silly or we don't want to pay for it. And so the argument there is, okay, they already have it. It's cheaper, and if you are the spouse that is working and paying for alimony, child support, and have that group term insurance, a couple things can happen. One, you can lose your job, you can change your job, in which case there's a risk there of you might not be insurable once one of those things happen, or if you go out on your own or whatever. There's also the risk or the possibility that you as the owner and the payer can change the beneficiary.
Yep.
So, they have tried to circumvent saying, okay, well, we'll send in once a year the beneficiary, proof of the beneficiary and proof of it. I don't like that because if something were to happen and the new significant other is the beneficiary, we can't really fight it, right? The beneficiary
Right.
is the beneficiary, and now we're dealing with a loss of somebody important, and now no child support or maintenance going forward. And so it gets really complicated. So the way I like to solve the problem is cross-owned life insurance on one another. So spouse A, spouse B, they are the owner and they are the payer, and the other spouse is the insured. So, Gary, for example, if you and I were getting divorced, I would own a policy, you would be the insured, I would be the payer and the beneficiary. So if something happened to you, that your child support payments and maintenance payments, if you were to pass away before all those obligations were met, I know that I have coverage for me and said family. I know you can't change the beneficiary, you can't stop paying, and it becomes my responsibility. I like it cross-owned, even if there's not an alimony, if payments are only going one way, especially when kids are involved. Because if the non-moneyed spouse is no longer in the picture, even if they're receiving money for child support, their invisible job of taking care of the kids,
Right.
driving them places, food shopping, cooking, all of those things now have to be replaced by someone else. So I always find it beneficial to have it cross-owned so that everybody has protection, and especially with children, it's in the best interest of the children that in case something were to happen, there. And it also locks in your insurability and the term insurance so that we don't have to worry about the group term or you're not being insured and have to worry about if someone else is going to pay the policy or change the beneficiary.
And if it's cross-owned, then you and I both would be able to see if it's being currently paid or not, correct?
Correct. So like if I own a policy on you, I'm paying it.
Right.
So I'm making sure that this is in my interest. If you choose to not pay your policy and I'm the insured, I wouldn't know necessarily that you're not paying it. There is language that you can put in saying once a year, let's have like an insurance update. People often do that too, just to check like income, right? Like if there's a big disparity in income and it's based upon maintenance and child support, then sometimes we have to review those numbers moving forward. But for the life insurance, you wouldn't necessarily know if it's cross-owned, but it would be in your best interest to pay the policy because you would benefit from that.
Right. Another thing that I have found that people don't think about when they're going through the settlement is the health insurance, especially as expensive as
Huge
it
one.
is now. Yeah.
It's a huge one. And sometimes I see people getting legally separated but stay together
Hmm.
for the health insurance. So that's definitely goes into the planning process of like who carries the family's benefits and what that looks like for the person who is not who doesn't have the benefits, make sure is it available? Like what if you're working, are you able to? Do you have to go to the marketplace? What your income looks like now and how that affects the cost of it. But it's definitely a big one.
So, obviously we're talking about I'm going to say major trauma here when it comes to, this and lots of times, on either side, um, you know, when we help counsel, we would love for them not to go through this, but it seems like they're going to. Um, in going through this, beforehand even, what is some of your counsel been to your business owners and to the spouse about the finances? Because many times I find, especially upon death, upon divorce and stuff like that, one spouse is taking care of the finances for the family, and it's not always the business owner. In
Yeah.
how to get them to make sure that both are on the same page and both understand, the finance side of things.
Yeah, two things. I'm very pro prenuptial agreement. I think that's always a good idea. People kind of frown at that and it has like a negative connotation. You're planning for divorce. I don't think that's the case. I think we want to all get married and grow old together and live happily ever after. But the statistics show that it's about 50%, and that number is getting higher. And for second divorces, it's even higher. There's a big phenomenon now about gray divorce, and that's getting divorced after 55, which complicates things, business owner or not, because you have that healthcare component that you talked about. But also, there's a lot of sizable assets, after the fact that the kids are grown and you're out, and now you're thinking about retirement. You're closer to retirement and what that looks like. And you're not always able to go back to work if you're the non-moneyed spouse there. So that's something to take into consideration. But getting back to the original question, which I lost my train of thought because I went on that tangent there.
Right. No, it's just more, typically there's one spouse that takes care of the
Oh, yeah,
finances more than the other. And like I said, it's not always the business owner that's doing that. Um,
right.
how do you work with them to get them both involved with it so they both understand? Because again, it doesn't have to be divorce. It could be, it could be death, it could be anything. And then
Yeah.
suddenly that person who's not used to dealing with the finance is now thrusted into it, and now they have to.
And it's totally overwhelming. Yeah, we call that kind of
Yeah.
like the non-CFO spouse. And even if we're talking about happily married couples, business owners or non-business owners, back in the day, you would check the mail, right? And say,
Right.
okay, this is where our mortgage is, this is where our taxes are, this is our credit card. In today's world, we live in a paperless society that everything is electronic. And with two-factor identification, I can barely get into my own accounts,
Yeah.
let alone try to get into my husband's accounts. So it's not so easy. So to have that communication, that financial communication, it's super imperative, I think, and the sooner you start it, the better, but it's never too late to start. I think that financial communication is a big, or the lack thereof, is a big component to divorce. And a lot of times there's financial infidelity too.
Yep.
There could be an underlying gambling problem. There could be underlying spending issues that the other person doesn't necessarily know about. I really encourage all of my clients to have a quarterly financial date night and to make it fun. It doesn't have to be this terrible, oh, we have to do our bills, oh, we have to, talk about our taxes. We sit and we plan our vacations right together as a couple. We, plan the things that we want to do. But we don't often plan our finances. And like you said, one person kind of takes that burden on and deals with the day-to-day bills or deals with the day-to-day savings. Oftentimes, some people are just blindly signing tax returns, not knowing what they actually have. Um, and it's hard in today's day. So I think the financial date night, make it fun, make it quarterly, get your favorite takeout, grab a bottle of wine, whatever, and talk about, short-term goals, snapshot of all the accounts, make sure everyone knows the titling of things. That's super important. Especially with the business who has access to certain things. Could, God forbid, there was a disability or a death, even prior to divorce, it's really hard to get information if it's not granted ahead of time. And that panic sets in, like when you're in those traumatic experiences. So the more information that's shared ahead of time, and I go through this tool with my clients called an asset map, and we take a balance sheet of their overall life and we make it into a picture, like pictorially, and it kind of shows what's in spouse A's name, what's in spouse B's name, what's in joint, how much insurance, how much debt. And that's kind of like the 5,000 point view to be like, hey, where are we today? What do we want to do moving forward? But make sure everyone knows where we are at that moment, that snapshot. So I feel like that's always helpful.
I think you just found a new business that you can do here, and it's family financial date night. That'd be a new game that's out there for sure.
Yeah.
Um, you know, going through this, and one of the things you touched on was, if someone, they may become incapacitated, not death, but just, and if, I'm a sole owner business and my spouse doesn't know, how does my business continue?
Yeah.
And it may be something where it's just, again, it's a temporary incapacity or whatever. And being able to carry forward with that. So I think that's important. I mean, it's not always just, death or divorce. I mean, it just could be that, you know, you know, I got COVID real bad and I'm in the hospital and I can't sign
Yeah.
anything. The employees can't be paid and so forth. So what planning has that business owner done, for that is important also. So I think that's another piece, in here for that, financial date night, would be important to talk
Absolutely.
about too.
Yeah, and the statistics of becoming disabled, either short term or long term, are high,
Mhm.
especially depending upon the line of work that you're in and, the kind of lifestyle that you live. So that is something that we always take into consideration. Like, is there disability insurance, or in case of a disability, do we have the proper estate planning documents prepared for power of attorney, healthcare proxy, all of those things, and do they cover not just our personal life, but like you said, the
Right.
business life, to make sure that the continuity of that business can continue while the business owner is receiving care or resting and getting better. So it's super important.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, we've covered a lot of stuff. We could, go on for quite a bit of time because there are so many things that are important for not just business owners but individuals when they look at this. Because again, like I said, I've seen too many times, through divorce or death, or even somebody who's gotten injured, about one spouse not knowing the finances, not knowing where everything is. So I think it's important. I like your idea of financial date night. I think it is something important to do. What have I not asked you wish I had?
One thing that I think that is interesting in the divorce world that not a lot of people know about is collaborative divorce. So everyone knows kind of, you think when you're on the brink of divorce or you think you're going to go to divorce, you have to have an attorney. That has shifted to, you now can go to mediation instead of an attorney, and it's one person, and it saves time, money, and energy, which we all love. And it stays out of the court system. There is what's a fairly new topic called collaborative divorce. And that, I call it like the hybrid model. And so in collaborative divorce, all of the professionals that are trained in collaborative are trained. So we're avoiding, high conflict divorce resolution. And we are all agreeing that we're not going to go to court, that we're going to solve this issue and dissolve the marriage together collectively as a team approach. What's unique about collaborative is that there's 4 players. Each spouse gets their own collaborative attorney. So instead of just having one mediator in the middle, kind of going back and forth, each spouse gets their own collaboratively trained attorney in their corner. There is a financial neutral, which is usually a CDFA or a CPA that's collaboratively trained. And then there's also a family specialist, which is usually a mental health professional that's like the facilitator and helps with the parenting plan if there's children involved. And so the collaborative approach is more than mediation, but less litigious than going the conventional lawyer to lawyer route. And not a lot of people know about it. And I think it is a very good option for people who need a little bit more. And if there's more assets involved, that mediation is not equipped enough for them, but they still want to keep it private and outside the court system and be amicable.
Yeah, I think, anytime that you can avoid that expense and that, I'm going to say trauma in going through a divorce, you want to try to do that as much as possible. Now, Melissa, if people like what they hear and they want to reach out to you and talk to you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so my business is called Mindful Financial Partners. My website is just www.mindfulfinancialpartners.com. I have a QR code up here if they want to go right to the website. But happy to connect on LinkedIn or direct email. I offer free consultations for regular financial planning or divorce financial planning, and would love to help any business owners or clients that you may have that have additional questions.
Great. Really appreciate your time today and appreciate our talk.
Definitely. Thanks, Gary, for having me.
Sure. Hey, this week our guest was Melissa Murphy Pavone, and she is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. And I'll see you guys next week.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.